Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. My name is Janice Malillo, your host. And of course, I have an amazing guest on today. And just to let everyone know that we also are simulcasting through the Wisdom audio app, and we have some listeners who are live currently on. So thank you so much for being here today. Wow, I just want to start off by saying your butt is too big. Not what you may think. And without further ado, I want to welcome to the Stories podcast my amazing guest, the author of his second book, Your Butt is Too Big. He's not only an author, he's also a sought-after speaker, counselor, spiritual life coach, and former co-host of the TV show Grace Factor Podcasts. And by the way, Your Butt is Too Big, #1 new releases in Christian faith and Christian counseling. I am honored and privileged to welcome my guest, the amazing Maurice Martin. Welcome to the Stories podcast.
Thank you so much, Janice. And you know, when we had like a pre-conversation a few weeks ago, and that was such an uplifting conversation that I can only imagine how today is going to go. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Me too. And thank you so much for saying that. You know, your book, and you had mentioned our pre-podcast chit chat. And I think I told you in that pre-podcast chit chat that, you know, obviously I love podcasting, that goes without saying, but more importantly for me, it's about making that connection with the guest prior to going on live, because you learn so much about each other in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
And what I learned and what I felt from you is, I don't know how to describe it, but I have to describe it in a way. If I were to say, who do you believe has the it factor, but not knowing how to really describe it? Maurice, that is you, my friend. That is you. So thank you for that connection.
Absolutely.
You know, your book, and when I introduced the book's name, I did it with a little lightheartedness, but I really wanted to do it in such a way, excuse me, that honors your journey, because you really wrote this from a very personal, a very raw, a very authentic place. You know, you thought your life was going one way. Would you like to give us the backdrop of your story and why your butt was too big?
Absolutely. So I begin my story. My wedding night was one of the first stories that I share in the book. And if you picture your wedding day, right, it's supposed to be the most beautiful day of your life. I can't say that mine wasn't, right? I married the perfect person. We were surrounded by family and friends who loved us, and they showered us with love and affection. And we get to the wedding night, and I need to run to the store to grab something. And I walk out the door, and I have a panic attack. And if any of you guys have ever had an anxiety attack, a panic attack, and all of a sudden your heart is racing and you can't breathe and your mind is racing and you're trying to slow down, and I'm thinking to myself, when will this end? When will I finally be able to enjoy a good moment without my mind attacking me, without my past chasing after me, without being chastised by the mistakes of my life, by the shortcomings of my life, so many things. And I set that as the course of the entire book, because so many of us experience beautiful moments that we never take in.
Mhm.
Like you look forward to this day and you write it on the calendar and you mark it down. As soon as I get this job promotion, as soon as we get to this concert, as soon as I get to this big event, this big presentation, and you mark these things on your calendar and you look forward to them, and you never live the life that leads up to them because you're just waiting for that day. You're never in the present, you're always in the future. Once I get to that day, life will be good. Once I get to that day, life will be whole. Once I get to that day, and you get to the day, and you realize you don't know how to live it. You don't know how to embrace it. You don't know how to embody it. And so that day for me, and a few choice other was that I'm sure we'll kind of talk about as we go through this interview, were just this huge moment for me of the revelation and the realization I had to change. I had to grow. That there's no way that I could stay that version of me and have a healthy marriage. At this point in my life now, we're 6 years later. Now I have a daughter and a son. I could have never become the father that I wanted to be, the husband that I wanted to be, the entrepreneur that I wanted to be without healing. And I learned in some of those moments I was not healed. And so I guess that's how we start the interview is, have you accomplished a bunch of things in your life and all of the accomplishments highlight that you're not healed and not whole? If that's you, then I've been there.
Right, because you're, as I said in your book, you really break it down into different parts, 7 principles that empower you to
Mhm,
heal past those hurts and
mhm,
get motivated to find your purpose.
mhm,
Finding your purpose really starts. And when I read that, and obviously I've read your bio and,
mhm.
did my typical vetting process.
Sure.
But what stood out to me was in principle 1, for instance, as I'm talking about your story,
Mhm,
evaluate your story.
mhm,
That is very profound because I don't think we look at our stories as something to evaluate. Maybe sometimes we look at them as this was a tragedy that happened. This is something that happened. I'm not getting anywhere.
mhm,
But as you mentioned, we're always thinking in the future. Well, as soon as I get this job promotion,
mhm,
dot, dot, dot.
mhm. Our story is really our personal perspective and perception of what we've been through, right? So technically speaking, if you asked a brother, a sister, a mother, someone who's been around you your entire life, I know you have a sister, right? If you asked your sister, sit down for me and write down my life story, she would write a different story than you would. She would highlight different things. She would bring forth different memories that express who you are as a human. You yourself would think of different stories and you would highlight different things. So my story isn't necessarily the fullness and the wholeness of what I've been through.
Mhm.
It's the highlights that I tend to focus on. And so I could tell you that, before my life really started to change, I had one story about how I grew up and where I was from. And my story was, Maurice will always be close, but not close, but not close enough. Maurice will always be a failure and a disappointment. Maurice will always, and there was all these things, and I would say, and there's this story that proves it, and this story that proves it, and this story that proves it. Well, at someday, if you begin to get healthy, you can say, Maurice is an overcomer. And suddenly, the story you used to use that highlighted the disappointment is actually the beginning before when you overcame it. You then highlight different moments. You sometimes we make memories into idols, right? We make our devastation things that we focus on so much that we almost place it above God. We place it above a higher power. And so your story is something that must be evaluated. It's something that must be analyzed from different directions and sometimes takes help from others. Your
Right.
therapist will probably help you see your story differently than you saw it. A pastor, a preacher, a prophet, a teacher, somebody close to you is probably going to help you see your story with more healthy eyes.
Wow. And, as you were describing that, something that I wrote down is, when you were talking about the highlights of our story,
Mm-hmm.
and you were saying, well, see, here is something. My question would be, I think, or maybe it's more of a comment. I think when we are trying to evaluate or make sense of something that has happened, we intentionally or maybe unsubconsciously look for that proof to validate how we feel. See,
Absolutely.
here, I told you, this is my
Absolutely.
story.
100%. I agree. And so the question is, one of the first things that I do when I sit down with a coaching client, I ask, first of all, here's the question. What is the name of the chapter you're in your life? It's almost always one of the first questions I ask a client. What is the chapter you're in? Because how you title it, how you define it, you will then be able to support the title. So if I look at my life today and I title it, I hope I'm done soon, then everything that I look at in the rest of this chapter will be for the lens of me trying to hurry up and get life over with. But if this chapter is titled The Best Chapter of My Life, I will search for the evidence that I'm living in that best chapter. I'll see it in front of me. Things that you look for find you, right? And it's not necessarily that the other things weren't happening in other seasons of your life. You weren't looking for them. You pushed them aside. You cast them away. I know that there's been seasons where a couple people had negative things to say about me. A couple people didn't believe in me. But there was all these other people speaking life, telling me how they believed in me and how proud of me they were. Well, some seasons I couldn't hear any of the positivity. 20 people said positive things to me. One person said something negative. I clung to the one thing. I'm sure you've been there before.
Yes.
It's because I was in a chapter called Nobody Believes in Me. So whatever you title your chapter, you search for and you prove.
So it's almost like, okay, as you're asking that question, what is the name of the chapter you are in?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, for me, I feel there are sub chapters.
Yes. 100%.
That are like this building block.
Yes.
That chapter.
Yes. Yes. When you write a book, your whole purpose is you make your statement and then you prove the statement. You give it backing, you give it undergirding. Well, when I'm working on myself, when I'm working on my mindsets or working on the way that I approach life, it's not enough for me to just be on the surface and say, this is how I'm going to look at life moving forward. I must prove it. I must undergird it. I must support it, right? And so there's so many ways that you can do that. Some people read books that kind of strengthen their understanding of how to change their life. Some people listen to teaching. Some people do it through journaling or through meditation, through prayer. There's so many ways to do it. But what I need to do is undergird my belief system. I need to strengthen my belief system because once I title something, I become a starved person who is looking to be fed by that thing. If I say this is my season for success, what is success? So I have to eat a successful breakfast and learn the flavor of success in the morning. And I have to have success at lunchtime. But every time I sample the flavor, I'm learning success or sometimes relearning success. Right? In my 20s, success was move other guys out of the way, prove I'm better than everybody. Well, that's not success for me as a 39-year-old man. Success for me today is look in the mirror at the end of the day and feel like I did what God put me on the earth to do. Mm-hmm. Success looks like I made my daughter proud, my son proud, my wife proud, my mama proud. My success is different. So in the morning, I got to eat a bite of success, something that reminds me of what I believe in and what I stand for and what I'm going after. And I got to do that throughout the day. And so I think that's critical. I have to define what I want, then I have to support what I want. And I can't just do that in my imagination. Sometimes sometimes it takes actual processes or actual just implementation of different habits and practices.
So different strategies, and that's really one of the reasons why I absolutely love your book, because you break it down in different strategies. And I think one specifically on page 25, as you're describing your book, something really stuck out to me. Is it okay if I read it back to you?
Yes, absolutely.
So what you said on page 25 is, my job is to share my revelations, insights, and perspective. Your job is to do the work.
Yes. Yes. I think sometimes what happens is a guy like me writes a book, and someone hears me speak on a podcast, on a radio station, on a TV show, a station, whatever it might be, and they go, he's the answer to my success. And I wanted to make sure that when you picked up my book, that you quickly understood he is not your answer to success. The person staring at you in the mirror is the key to your success. It's going to be what you do, what you choose, what you face, what you acknowledge, what you turn to. It's going to be those things that are going to change your life, not necessarily me. I'm simply a catalyst, right? I believe that I'm a catalyst in the hands of God, that he gives me words or questions to ask you, or visuals that stir something up on the inside of you. But what will you do with it? Where do you go from there? And to me, that is the most important thing. It's not about me in the end. It's about you. Nobody who tried to help me in my journey could actually change me. Some of them wanted to. Some of them wanted to shake me into place, right? Maurice, why are you doing this? But in the end, when I wasn't ready to change, I didn't. When I was ready to change, I did the work to change. And sometimes I failed, and sometimes I got it wrong, and sometimes I got it right. And it was a journey and a process, but it took me walking the process. And the same will be true for you. If you need to change, it's not about me giving you a magic formula. It's about you changing your life one attempt at a time, one decision at a time.
You know, as you were describing that, and thank you so much for sharing that, because you know, our insights and perspectives are really, I believe, the key to searching for that truth. And I've often, for instance, chatted about, my son's tragic accident. And by the way, he's okay, and I'm blessed and grateful. And I say that with everything that I am, and everything that he is amazing. But, in trying to make, as a parent, or even if you have a loved one that has gone through something so dramatic, you try to search for the truth and try to make sense of what is happening. And I didn't realize it at the time. But, through this tragedy, I was able to establish my success. I am a work in progress. And somebody asked this morning in one of my Facebook groups, what is success to you? Now, normally, I know this is hard for some people to understand. I am a little shy by nature. Whatever, I know.
Would you believe that I am too?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Two shy people chit-chatting.
That's it.
That's awesome. And I paused for a moment, and people were, saying so many amazing things. Oh, success is making money. That way I can, share my wealth and help other people out, whatever it may be. And for me, in that moment, it was success for me is engaging and connecting with people that I love to serve. in whatever form that would be. And I think that really is my truth.
Well, you described two things that I think are so critical to the human journey. The first thing you said was, I'm a work in progress. I think that so many people, they look to people like you and I, and they wonder how they crossed the finish line we've crossed. And what they miss is we haven't crossed the finish line.
Mm-mm.
We are works in process. I mean, every day of my life, I've got something that frustrates me, something that gets me down, something that I have to overcome, right? That I'm a normal human. And so step number one is I have to know that this is not about being perfect. It's about the process perfecting me. I think that's the first important and critical step in the journey. And then when I start to really go deeper and say, now, what is fulfillment and what is happiness and what is success? I need to know two things. The first thing is, if I'm a work in progress, my definition of words like success and happiness and contentment are also works in progress.
Mhm.
And what I see as success today, it may be different 10 years from now, and that's okay. And so what I need to do is ask myself the question today: what will give me fulfillment? What will give my life meaning? What will make me feel like I used the breaths that came in my lungs and the blood that kept moving through my body? See, God kept saying yes to me today, and I had a chance to live today. Did I take
Yeah.
advantage of it somehow? Did I make someone smile? Did I help somebody out? Did I move in the direction of my dreams? Did I do something positive? Or did I just sit in self-pity? And if you just sat in self-pity, we already know that's the opposite of success. Whatever success is, we know that's the opposite. And the key is not to beat yourself up, not to chastise yourself, but to say, okay, here you are sitting on your couch feeling broken. But what do you have in your life to be thankful for?
Mm,
And
absolutely.
as you begin to practice gratitude, 2 to 3 things you're thankful for, you'll begin to realize that even sitting on the couch, there's some way that you were successful today. Because there's people who, when they think of you, their lives get better. That's a form of success. There is someone who probably called you when you were down and you gave them good advice though you couldn't take it for yourself. That was success. See, sometimes we make life so black and white, we miss that the most beautiful elements of life come in the shades of gray. It's those gray areas that are somewhat undefined where we find the meaning of life and we find the quality of life we're actually looking for. It's not actually the driving the fancy car. It's not actually the big home. It's the life within the home and the person driving the car that matters. When you find that meaning, you find everything you're looking for.
That is so beautiful because, and as you said, life within the home. I got back again to our conversation, and I remember saying to you, your photograph, your headshot, love the photograph. And you said that your wife took that with her iPhone.
She did.
And I felt a connection to that because for you to shine, like that told me everything in that photograph. That told me so much. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
It is. It is. And so what are these things that we can learn? One of the lessons that I had to learn as I went through my healing journey, one of the most critical ones was, we can't do things alone. I know that people can't believe it when they hear me talk, but I truly am an introvert. If I can sit all alone by myself in a cave for a long period of time, I will usually choose that over being in front of a bunch of people having a big social gathering. But I cannot flourish the way that I need to without learning how to trust certain individuals, without being able to let down my walls around some people. And so my wife being the person to stand in front of me and take the photo that ended up in my book was critical, because my wife is the person who had to endure the lows and the highs of my journey. My wife is the person who has to relive her own snapshots in her mind of what I was going through. Sometimes when we're all alone, or we feel we're all alone in a situation, we miss the people who are loving us, wishing they could help. And it's when we learn how to give them more of ourselves, then we receive more of ourselves that we need. I'll say that again. When we learn how to give more of ourselves to the people closest, we actually end up gaining more of ourselves. Because my wife sometimes says, but baby, you understand about yourself that. And sometimes she gives me revelations about me that I couldn't see about myself. Things that I discount, things that I don't think are important to or relevant to talk about. She says, no, this is critical for you to highlight. This is something people believe in when they think about you. Don't discount that. So when you give yourself to someone, they give you back some of yourself. And I think that is to me, the picture that you see when you think about someone being able to capture that moment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think too, it's like an investment in your time together, like that quality. And maybe it was only 5 minutes. Like, what is your wife's name, by the way?
Her name is Ashley, but it's pronounced Ashley. So people just call her Ashley usually, but it's Ashley.
So Ashley, beautiful photograph. Thank you so much for that. And they always say that behind every successful man is a successful woman. And I think that's vice versa for both of you. And in that investment moment for each of you, whether it was 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it was, that connection is raw and real. And I love how you described when we learn, you gain more of ourselves back. And I really see that in you.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. How important would you say, and I know that this is such a broad subject, but mindset, it really isn't everything that we do, and how we practice it, whether it be through journaling. And in fact, in one part of your book, as you're going through the different strategies, you have some affirmations that relate back, excuse me, to different sayings, specifically from a spiritual point of view. And I love how you captured that, because there is a genuine connection. Like, you almost feel uplifted in the sense like, okay, I can do this. Like, maybe I'm just, when people say mindset, maybe I'm just making it too hard for myself.
Mindset is a very complicated thing to me. And by complicated, I simply mean, I think I know what the truth is. You mentioned the words earlier. You said my truth, right? Well, I think I know what my truth is. But sometimes what I miss is that what I've been through in my life, some of the tragedy, some of the heartbreaks, some of the painful moments that maybe I didn't all the way heal from, they can skew my perception of the truth. So I think that, that now that I've lived a few years and now that I've grown in some ways, I think I really understand what the truth is. And sometimes what has happened is that what I've been through has left me a little bit bitter or a little bit broken. And I'm not quite seeing things 100% as they are. I'm seeing them 95% as they are, 90% how they are, 85% how they are. Well, that little bit that's off matters a whole lot, because that's part of how I strategize my life. I strategize based on mindset. So when I'm ready to heal my life, to change my life, what I have to do is I actually have to go back and say, now let's evaluate this. Is there anything that I've been through that I haven't fully healed from? I describe in the book wounds versus scars. Is it a wound or is it a scar? Now, a scar is something, when you look at it, you see the evidence that something happened. But when you touch a wound is something that is still open, that is still deeply disturbed. And so sometimes what I find is that when I actually look at my life, I find areas that are still open and broken and wounded. And I need to actually lean in to help those things. Maurice, how do you do that? It's by those types of spiritual affirmations. It's by prayer. It's by meditation. It's by sitting down and allowing yourself to re-envision that part of your life, but healed, right?
Mhm.
There, for much of my life, I had these father issues, daddy issues that left me feeling like I was not good enough as a little boy, right? That directly impacts how I see myself as a man. Well, dad didn't stick around for me. So who will stick around for me as I get older, as I get wiser? Maybe everybody will leave me and abandon me. It's all this negative self-talk. And so in these last few years of my life, through therapy, through counseling, I have had to very slowly but surely analyze those areas of my life and revisit them so I can revitalize my perspective of them. And I know right now she's frozen, but hopefully you guys can still see me. I'm peeking over on my phone and I still see that it's working. So there you go, there you're back. So I end up having to look at myself and revisit who I believe I am in those situations. And I can unlearn unhealthy patterns and unlearn unhealthy mindsets and unlearn unhealthy perspectives. And it shifts the way I look at myself in the end. And I think that's the critical importance.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the wounds versus the scars. And for instance, I have this little, this time of year, I get my right thumb, for whatever reason, I always get a crack in it, in the skin.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts like a son of a gun. It's really annoying. But anyways, I have issues and I'm having a bad day. Not good. But yesterday, as I was putting a Band-Aid on this, I really, and I was looking at your book where you were talking about wounds versus scar. And I thought about that for a moment. And I went back to when I was in the waiting room, when I initially was able to get to Philly right after my son's accident. And there was just so much going on. And there was a candy machine. And of course I looked over and they had a bag of chips. And I'm like, well, let me just get a bag of chips, and I wasn't going to open the bag. I wasn't going to open the bag because I have this thing about potato chips. Can't be trusted around a bag of chips. But so I start to open it and I cut this thumb, almost a paper cut. Well, I start bawling my eyes out. But what I realized in that moment yesterday, putting the Band-Aid on, it's okay to put the Band-Aid on, but it takes a lot to move past the wounds and the scars. And, in starting this podcast really has given me the hope that, they're in sharing these stories, of course, that other people will take action in their lives. And it's okay to have a wound. It's okay to have a scar, but it's how we revisit those different, when I look at this, like I said, I think of that day in the waiting room.
There's something that a person can gain if they allow themselves. I would almost challenge everybody, especially if you're watching this on replay or you're listening on replay. But if you're listening to this, ask yourself, do you ever let yourself look back at a situation the way we just heard Janice do? She looked back. We were actually in the room and we saw you when you looked over and you saw the vending machine. And then we could feel you when you were holding that bag in your hands, right? And then we could understand why you cried, because the pain kicked in. And then we realized that you were crying because you didn't think it was even important, but it brought all these other things into your mind. How many moments like that have we lived where we have been cut by life but we refuse to revisit the memory because we think it would be too much to revisit. And so we become haunted by what we've been through instead of healing through it so we can learn from it. Right? That I've become afraid of my past. But your past is to be embraced because it's part of who made you who you are. And if you heal from it, it's part of what will help you get to your destiny.
Wow. That is so true. And, you know, before I got on live, my son had actually texted me, and he sent me a picture of himself. And I thought in that moment, I am blessed. Grateful. I still have my son. It's okay to move forward. Like, I've got this. And again, I think his story obviously still gets to me, of course.
Of course.
But it's okay to revisit it.
I think people need to understand the power of the scar. Sometimes people believe that moving on means that there will be no evidence that you went through what you went through. So if I move on, I will never acknowledge what I've lost. I'll never acknowledge what hurt me. I'll never acknowledge what broke me. But when I've been through something, there is evidence. Now, maybe my scar is placed in a place that only I can see. My scar may be in a place that only I can find and those most intimate with me. But there will always be a scar. And that's why we don't have to be afraid to heal. You're not dishonoring what you've been through. You're not dishonoring who you've lost or what you've lost in your journey. You're simply saying it doesn't have to stop me from growing today. It doesn't have to leave me vulnerable to attack today. I'm going to heal enough to not be vulnerable from attack so that I can be open to the possibilities of what life offers me. That is the ultimate gift that we get from a scar, right? The scars aren't terrible things.
Wow. I love how you said that. And, you know, it really solidifies that there is always hope. There's always hope in that storm, because the storm may be the wound, the storm may be the scar, but you know, if we have the faith to move forward with hope, there isn't anything that we can't conquer.
What if the storm is what delivered what gets you through the situation, right? That I always think of a storm when I'm in a weak place, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. When the storm comes, I say, oh, great, this is going to ruin everything. But when I'm in a healthy place, sometimes I realize that God may have sprinkled seeds that only the storm can water. In other words, sometimes I've been working on my marriage, but it's not until rough waters hit that my wife and I get closer. Sometimes I have been working on my business strategies and my business implementation, but it's not until the money gets funny that I get stronger. Sometimes the storm waters the seed that will lead to all the new growth you need. And so I don't think we need to always be so afraid of the storm. I think we need to find a way to find gratitude in the midst of the storm. And I know that's easier said than done. It is, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Wow. Gratitude in the midst of the storm. Absolutely. Wow. Do you have, I just want to segue over a moment and thank all of our amazing listeners currently on the Wisdom Audio app. I see so many familiar names. Thank you all so much for being here today. And if it's okay with you, I would love to invite one of the guests up.
Yes, please.
Or ask you a question. Perfect.
Please.
So Wisdom, we have time for one guest to come up. And of course, if you have any questions or would love to contribute to the conversation, we would love to have you come up. So don't hesitate to join us on stage here. This has been such an amazing conversation. I think that we've really covered so many different things, so many different strategies. I know it took you a while to write this book. And sometimes I love to ask, and I'm really eager to hear your answer to this. The day that your book went live.
Scariest day of my life. So what is interesting is that in my 20s, I was a musician, and releasing music is an incredibly vulnerable experience. You have poured your soul into a piece of music, and people's reaction to it makes your heart rise and fall based on their response. This book was bigger and deeper than that, because I shared some childhood secrets. Not that I told, I didn't tell many stories, but I told enough that people have an understanding of what I never said. I told some stories about my life falling apart in my 20s. I talked about alcoholism and being drunk and high at work, things that I don't really want people to think about me or know about me. I mean, I got naked so someone else could take off their clothes and get clean. So when my book came out, I think that I breathed a sigh of relief, and I also said, now what next? Because the whole point of the book is to change somebody's life, to help somebody, to motivate someone, to inspire someone, to show people that God is trying to change them like he changed me. And so it was like this moment of, then when I found out that it was a bestseller, right, in 2 different categories on Amazon, and my heart felt so full, and yet I was still like, now what's everybody going to say when they read it? Now what's everybody going to feel when they get a chance to open the pages? So I felt this huge sense of relief, this huge sense of release, and also this huge moment of, ooh, now the real journey begins. And I look at this honestly as the greatest accomplishment of my life, other than getting married to the right person and having beautiful babies, right? Next to that, this book is the start of my wife and I's ministry in so many ways. And I really believe even more so than my first book. And so, yeah, it was exciting. It's still exciting. And every time I get feedback from someone, it reminds me why I wrote it in the first place.
That is so beautiful. And, I remember the first time that I became a published author, and I had that same feeling. And to hit #1 new releases in Christian faith and Christian counseling, sometimes that is difficult to do, but I think you really looked past that. Like your message, the message of your story was so powerful. As you said, you needed to strip down. Did
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because people always ask me, Maurice, who are you for? Like, who can you help as a coach? Who are you meant to speak in front of? And I often say everyone, but if I have to give you a more detailed answer, I will, right? And what I mean by that is, I know that I'm called to leaders. People who are called to me usually have someone called to them. I know that. I know that I'm called to people who are looking for a spiritual answer to a physical problem, or a spiritual answer to an emotional problem, that they don't just want a cognitive answer they can get in a therapist's office. And I'm a counselor, so I'm not discounting science, right? I have to use science when I counsel. I have to use science when I coach. But I'm saying they know my answer is a little bit deeper than just a cognitive issue. That's who's called to me. What my message really speaks to, we all hurt, we've all been wounded, and we can all overcome it. That's the message of hope. That's the stories that inspire, right? And we all are a walking, talking version of a person who can have, and probably does have, stories that inspire us. And so I think that's really what I wrote. I just wrote a book to inspire people. And I told you how I did it and what helped me do it, so that it's a catalyst for you to change. And that's who doesn't need that message. I think everybody does.
I I think you are so right in that regard. And stories that inspire us really was inspired by my son and what
Mhm,
he went through and what he said to me in one particular moment that
mm,
really, here he's been through what he's been through, and he was so worried about his mama and spoke from the heart.
mm,
Like that is stories that inspire us,
mhm,
inspired by Brian's story. And I am so blessed and grateful. Again, a work in progress.
mhm,
I've felt that hurt. I know that you have.
mhm,
I've been wounded,
mhm,
and I'm still in the process of overcoming and healing, and that's okay.
mhm. It's okay for us all to acknowledge when we're not okay, so that we can finally become okay.
Mhm.
Some admitting you're not okay is the most beautiful permission. You're giving your permission to walk in the truth so that you can find solutions. If I convince myself I'm not okay, excuse me, if I convince myself I'm okay when I'm not, then I shut the door on answers. I shut the door on growing. I shut the door on support. I shut the door on healing. But if I acknowledge the areas where I'm not okay, and let me fine tune this. Somebody needs to hear this, because sometimes people listen to interviews like this and they say, "Well, I'm successful. I'm okay. Why are you trying to tell me I'm not okay?" This is about the area of your life where you're not okay. And I've never met a person who has not had an area of your life where you're not okay. So you may have it all figured out in the majority of your life, but if there's an area where you're not okay, when you admit that and you acknowledge that, you can find a way to become okay. You can heal there. You can mature there. You can get support there. You can evolve there. So acknowledging not being okay is permission to heal.
It certainly is. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for this opportunity to have met you and to connected, and to have you on today. I am in awe and continue to be in awe because your story is continuing to evolve, and I just can't wait to see where that next step takes you. I mean, I
Mm,
just so fascinated.
mm. Yeah, it's one day at a time. I'm trying to live in this moment. Sometimes my brain wants me to go, 10 steps farther than I'm at right now. But I would just say, if my words resonated with somebody today, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I'm always looking to be on podcasts and shows, and or to speak to people who need coaching and need help. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm not too far away. Go to my website, sign up. I actually still do free sessions for people. I do 30-minute sessions where people can talk to me. And I think sometimes people hear me speak and they think, oh, he's unattainable. Like, I'm not. You can reach me. Um, so I'm also looking forward to seeing where I go and where this journey takes me. But I'm thankful for the ride, and I'm
Mhm.
learning to be thankful for the ride. I don't always want to do that. I was very bad at that for most of my life, but I'm trying to make the most of this moment.
Wow, that is so beautiful. And Maurice, of course, where can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
Sure, absolutely. So there's two websites you can join me at. If you go to mauricefmartin.com, that's kind of the hub of everything. Or you can also go to yourbuttistobig.com. And that specifically kind of will tell you all the information about my book and about how to purchase it and all that good stuff. And one of the things you'll find is that I've been having monthly free workshops for people where I'm bringing people in and talking to 20, 30 people at a time, trying to just speak life into you. So there will be some opportunities to sign up for things, some freebies coming down the pipe. So find me in one of those two places, jump on a mailing list. The last place you can find me, I know some people are watching today on Facebook. I have a Facebook group. It's called The Realist You. And so if you look up The Realist You on Facebook, you'll find my private Facebook community. I just started it up on the day I launched my book. And so it's going to become increasingly active very soon. I've been behind the scenes putting a lot of things together. So find me there.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, I will make sure all of that information is in the show notes. My question for everyone before we sign off, is your butt too big?
So maybe I need to define it before I answer it for myself. You know your butt is too big if every time you speak about what you're meant to do in life, it is accompanied with a but. If your logic, your reasoning, and your rationale stands between you and the life you want to live, you know your butt is too big. And today, I feel like I've done enough healing and enough work and enough prayer and enough growing that today my butt is smaller than my faith. My butt is smaller than my will to follow God's will and moving in the direction I'm called to. And my partnership with my wife is strong enough that when my butt gets too big, she moves it down to size, and we work as a team. So today, my butt is not too big, and the goal is to help other people to get there too.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, everyone, your story is powerful, and your story can inspire others to really look at your butt is too big in such a different way. I am in awe, and trust me, we haven't even scratched the surface on having Maurice share more of his story. There's so much more to share. Maurice, I hope you will definitely consider coming back to stories that inspire us.
I would absolutely love to. And, I hope that, that this left somebody with a changed mindset or a changed perspective. So just thank you so much for having me today.
You are so welcome. Well, everyone, you heard it here. Such an amazing podcast today. Remember, again, your story is that important. Share it in a way that honors your journey. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, truly blown away and inspired by this amazing young man. Blessings to all. Thank you so much, everyone, and we shall see you again real soon. Bye for now.